Hey crafty friends, it's Chelsea and welcome to another Creative Design Team video. This month we are talking all about shakers. And probably when you hear shakers, you think shaker cards. There's tons of different ways that you can add shakers to your cards, and those are awesome. But I also want to show you how you can take your dies and make shaker elements for your scrapbook pages. So let's go on over to my table and get started. For today's project, I'm going to be using my new favorite, the Simple Leaves Stamp and Thin Cuts. I love that it has a solid leaf stamp and then dies for the veining of the leaves and the outline. I'm also using this beautiful Crisp Air paper collection. I used that in my last video and I still had a few sheets left, so I'm going to be using it again. And if you watched my last video, you know I did a number on that sticker sheet, so I am mostly going to be using my dies for this layout. I wanted to create my own background paper, and this Picture My Life card, I loved that kind of watercolor pattern on it with all the little like paint speckles. And I thought, you know what, why don't I replicate that? So I'm using Sundance and Paprika ink, as well as one of the ink blending brushes, some water, and I'm working on my all-purpose mat. I cut down this white daisy cardstock to 11.5 by 11.5 because I know I want to mat this afterwards. And I just smooshed some of my ink right onto my mat, gave it a healthy spritz of water, and now I am just rubbing the edges of my paper around. And you can see how I'm going back and kind of pushing it down. I'm trying to pick up all those little splatters. Now I could have dried my paper and then gone back in and picked up more ink, and I would get a little bit more definition with all the little splatters, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to keep right on going, so I decided just to go ahead with my paprika, and I'm just smooshing that all around. I did get a little bit heavy-handed there with my first little smoosh, and it was way bigger than what I wanted it to be. I wanted the color to stay more around the outside. But that's kind of how these things go, and I'm just going to roll with it. If you prefer to have a little bit more control, you can always put your ink onto a piece of plastic packaging and use the packaging technique to apply your ink. And that way you can actually see what you're doing. But I was kind of going for speed, and I didn't care if it was a little bit haphazard. From adding water, the colors got a little bit diluted, especially the paprika. So I decided to go in with my ink blending brush, and I am just darkening it up around the edges. I'm not going to come all the way in, or by the time I get all the way in, most of the ink is off of my brush, but just enough to kind of intensify the colors. Now you could do the same technique or similar technique with distress inks or oxide inks, but I wanted these colors to match my project and my other pattern papers exactly. So I decided just to use the Close to My Heart inks, and they did a beautiful job. I didn't dry my paper before I added the ink with the blending brushes. It wasn't super wet, it was just slightly damp. So I went lightly, I'm not using a ton of pressure, and that allowed me to work on my paper while it was still a little bit damp. I love the light application of ink that you can get with these blending brushes. It's a nice change from the mini ink blending tool, which is what I normally use. So now I had to decide what pattern paper I wanted for my layout. Those are the pictures that I'm using. So I thought the blue could be a good option because they coordinate with my daughter's dress. I didn't want anything too busy or too distracting. I thought the pumpkins and the leaves, although they're gorgeous, were just a little bit too much. So I'm going to end up going with that blue paper. I wasn't quite satisfied with my background, so I brought in this new stamp set called Background Elements. It has some really good images that work really nice with this kind of inky background that I have going on. I grabbed one of the splatter stamps that have like a whole bunch of different speckles on it. And then I'm going to go in on the paprika side of the paper with the paprika ink, both in first and second generation ink. So I get a variation of light and dark speckles, and I'm getting a little bit more of that speckly, splattery watercolor look that I was trying to pick up by pouncing my paper on the mat. I just wanted a little bit more texture in that background. That stamp set is great for controlled splatter if you're not into making a mess. All right, now it's time to jump in and start creating our little shaker element here. It's going to be a whole panel. This is about 4 1/4 wide by 11.5 tall. And I'm going to take the outline of the leaves. I love that you have the 2 dies on this set, the veins and the outline. Just gives you lots of flexibility in things that you want to create. And basically, I want to stay away from going right up to the edge, and I don't want the leaves to be too close together. So that's all I was really thinking about, and kind of tilting them different directions. So there I have my die cut panel with all my leaves punched out. I'm going to save those leaves for later. And then I grab my sanding block and I'm just going around and sanding both the outside edge and also the inside edge of those leaves. I did this sanding on my last layout on the blue paper, and I really love how it turned out and makes it blend a little bit more with the distressed look of the page. You also need to wipe it down with a dry paper towel because there's like blue dust everywhere from the sanding. I'm going to flip this over to the back, and I'm using a piece of acetate here to back my panel. This is actually a piece of overhead projector film. If you remember back in the day with projectors, it had all those clear film. I had a friend find me a couple of boxes actually of that at a secondhand store. So I keep that for all my shakers. You can also use packaging, plastic bags, page protectors, whatever you have that's clear. And you want to stick it down by putting your tape around the outside of those leaf shapes. I just used my ATG gun. You can use your tape runner, you could use liquid glue. If you're using liquid glue, just make sure that you do not put it too close to the shape or it will ooze out of the opening. I'm using these really thin foam strips here from, I believe it's Couture Creations, and they're super skinny. Just because I didn't have a lot of room, I didn't want to have to cut down thicker foam tape. So whatever you have that is dimensional, you could even use strips of craft foam here. I just like these strips because I can get in there and make all these little openings. Now remember with shakers, the most important thing is that foam tape touches. You don't want to have gaps because otherwise you'll have whatever sequins or filler you put in there leaking out onto your page. So you definitely don't want that happening. I could have left this all as one big compartment, but I didn't want all of my sequins to go right to the bottom. I wanted to have some in each of the openings. Now I fussed a lot with this background, but I decided that I wanted to kind of dirty it up a little bit, distress it a little bit. So I'm grabbing my Toffee ink, which is a nice warm light brown, and I am just inking up that edge, bringing it in a little ways. And then I'm also inking this edge of this ripped strip of leaf pattern paper. And then I inked the edge of this zip strip, the little branding strip. I really didn't need to, but there was a white edge showing on it. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ink it while I'm doing this. And I'm also going to ink the edges of my Kraft Cardstock, which is going to be the base of my layout. Now, if I have learned anything about making layouts with water or texture paste or mist or anything like that on them, is that you need to stick them down real good. So I don't even trust my ATG with this. That stuff sticks down pretty much everything else, but I like to use score tape, or if you have red line tape, just something really sticky. I peeled off the backing on the strips that are just in the middle, and this is on purpose because I want to be able to use the edge to line it up and make sure I get a nice even border. And then I go around and peel off the tape, the covering on the tape that's around the outside, one side at a time. And I found this is the best way to get something stuck on straight that is put on with score tape, because that stuff is so sticky. If you accidentally touch it down, that's where it's staying. Now I did have a little bit of warping on my layout, which I'm not concerned about, but I put some ATG on my Versamat to hold it in place while I do the rest of this. I really need my layout flat so that I can add all the shaker pieces and get that shaker panel stuck on there straight. For my shakers, I'm going to be using these autumn loose sequins. Sadly, they are retired, but they were just so perfect for this layout, I couldn't help myself. I had to use them. You could use whatever you want to go inside your shakers. I will have everything I'm using listed and linked down in the description box for you guys as well. Now, typically when I make a shaker, I would rather put the sequins in the side that has the acetate and the foam tape. But because I wanted that inked paper to be in the background, I thought it would be easier to put the sequins right onto my page in little piles. I used the blue paper as a template to make sure they were kind of where they should be in their little areas. And I just kind of guessed at the amount and hoped for the best. Peeled off the covering on my foam tape and stuck it on there. Pressed it down really, really well before I moved it because I didn't want any of those little beads or sequins to get under the foam tape. And there you can see the shake. It's so satisfying. Now, of course, I could not stop there. I couldn't resist making a card. So you can kind of see this application, the same technique, pretty much the same supplies in a card. The background I did with Stitch Swirl Thin Cuts, which is part of the Card Creativity Special for September. And I love how that looked with the leaf die cut out of the middle there. I did some of the splatter stamping with the background element stamp set. Same thing that I did on my other layout, but I have it all coming out from the leaf. And then that thanks die, I stacked several ones cut out of white cardstock and then topped it with gold glitter cardstock. Now, once I made that fall card, I was like, let's make a Christmas card. So I used the same sort of idea, except I used the Winter in a Bottle stamp set that was from the Christmas in July special. I'm hoping they bring it back over Christmas because it's a really cute set. I used that stitched swirl background and I highlighted the swirls with a clear Stardust gel pen. I used Glacier Lagoon, Harbor, and Charcoal inks. The blue colors is what I used to ink around the bottle, and I stamped the bottle in the gray. This is the stamp and die set here. Worked perfectly for this technique. And of course, I embossed some of the snowflakes, the tree, the little village scene in there is embossed, as well as my sentiment. I love how this turned out. And that combination of Glacier, Lagoon, and Harbor, I think I'm going to be using that combination again. So speaking of Christmas cards, this creative design team is hosting another 31 Days of Christmas Cards class this year. It's a month-long event with a new video posted every day in October. The videos are full of techniques and ideas. There's a large variety of styles from all 8 of us. If you sign up by September 25th, make sure you use the coupon code CDT EarlyBird to get the early bird discount. If you're a CDT Creatives member, you get the best discount of all, so make sure you visit the membership group for the coupon code. The link to register will be down in the description box. And all these beautiful cards that you see on the screen are from what we created last year in the 31 Days of Christmas Cards. Now, getting back to today's layout, I am going to be putting these 2 strips of paper under that edge. Thankfully, I left a little bit of room. I didn't put my foam tape right up to the edge, so I have just enough room to tuck these underneath. I struggled a little bit to get them under there straight, but I got it. So now I'm showing you that I'm using the vein thin cuts, and I'm going to be cutting them out of glitter paper. I have gold and mocha, and I have put adhesive sheets on the back. So that basically means the whole backside is adhesive, and when I die cut them out, it turns them into stickers. I love that. I just used my regular sandwich in my Big Shot machine, and I went forward and back just one time, and they cut out perfectly from that glitter paper. Now I'm taking these and putting them on top of the acetate. I'm lining them up with the bottom of the leaf so that they're a little bit closer to the bottom than the top of the leaf, and I think that works perfectly. You definitely don't need to put anything on top of your shakers, but I thought because these dies come with this feature, I just had to try it, and I love how they turned out. It just adds a little bit more glitz and it makes them a little bit more special and detailed. You can still tell that they're leaves without adding the veins, but I love that extra bit of glitter on top of them. I have my photos cut down to 3x3 and I have them double matted with a very thin border of the mocha color and then a little bit thicker border of white. And I've decided I'm going to overlap them kind of in the center of my page. I'm trying to keep some of that white still visible that was in the center. So I'm trying to keep them kind of squished towards the middle a little bit more. I took my leaves and cut them out of vellum, and then I just kind of folded them over to create the creases in them. And I'm using some of those blue pattern paper leaves that got cut out from my shaker. And then I also cut more of the veins out of glitter paper. And I'm just going to create a visual triangle of embellishments, clustering the leaves together at 3 different points around this arrangement. I brought in those blue leaves both because I had them already die cut on my table, but also because I wanted to bring the blue from the left side over onto the right side. I thought it made it look a lot more cohesive if I didn't have just that big block of blue. And then there's also blue in my daughter's dress. So it kind of helps that blue go across the page and blend in a little bit more and balance everything out. I have my title up on foam tape and it's just not stuck down yet so that I can put all the leaves and everything down. And then for my photos, anywhere that overlaps that shaker panel, there will be just adhesive. And then the other part of the photo, there will be foam tape so that it's not sagging. These pictures are from my daughter's first fall. I can't believe she was ever that little. Like, she's only 2 now, but she was just tiny. My friend took some pictures for us, which was really nice. And she just happened to be wearing this beautiful blue dress. So that worked perfectly with this paper. I didn't have a huge story to tell. I just wrote about how this was our first fall together and everything is more special because she's here, right? Babies just make everything new again. Here is a close-up look at the layout. I'm loving how that background turned out. Very like splattery and messy looking, but I think it works really well. And I love that you can see that background kind of peeking out behind my shaker elements. There's definitely lots to keep your eye looking on this page, so probably a good thing it's a one-page layout. But here is a close-up look, so hopefully you can see all the details. You can see that nice sanding, all the little splatter stamping. And yeah, I love how this came together. If you're ready for more shaker inspiration, make sure you check out this playlist of the other videos from the Creative Design team. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.